meeting of the Port Authority for October 15th to order. Hi. First item on the agenda is the approval of the Port Authority minutes from September 12th. Any discussion?
I move acceptance.
Thank you.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Abstain, wasn't here.
That's right, okay. All good, okay. Next item on the agenda is study item on the South Loop District Plan update.
Is your microphone on?
It is.
Okay. Pull a little closer.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Apologize about interrupting. Can I just ask one quick question? Would there be any benefit of holding this over until the mayor could also be with us, given the role he has and the vision he has and the importance that this area has to the entire community? I don't want to take away from it, and I appreciate everyone being prepared for this, but
And
Yeah,
exactly,
and,
that was the
yeah.
next comment.
so yeah,
Coming?
No, he's not
he's
going
not-
to be here.
yeah.
Neither he or the president are here.
And so for that reason, I just thought it might make sense, if there isn't like a timing issue to what we're doing here, that we had to get something done, and which I don't believe there is, would it be possible to just hold this until we had them? Because they obviously, I think their input and opinion on this is important.
Yeah, my support on that.
Commissioner Hunt, may I? Acting
Please go ahead.
President? I forget the titles appropriately here. I think Acting President maybe. But I was going to say I had I think Tom Ramlin Olson, planner, Nick Johnson, planning supervisor, probably had a good solution for the mayor, but maybe not President Erickson. And that will also be connecting with the city council on this item, obviously wearing a different hat. Yeah, I mean, we welcome your guidance as how to do it. The one thing about the schedule was that we hope to get guidance and feedback from all the advisory boards and commissions prior to the city council discussion. So that sequencing probably would have to move around a little bit in terms of when we presented it to the city council, if we kept the same schedule or goals in place.
Well, perhaps our Port Authority administrator could weigh in on this and ask and speak to the possibility of giving some feedback by way of email, if that's permitted or not. But I agree with my fellow commissioner. That's the word. And because Bob Erickson has the roots deepest in history, I have always found his input and insight to be of particular importance. We all have different tenures here, but that's my 2 cents on the subject.
Madam Acting President,
Commissioner Peterson.
I guess on this sort of item, given that if it was two people, I'd be kind of in the bucket that you were. But given that it's just one person and that we have a video that could be watched and we have another means for feedback, for Bob to give feedback, I'd be okay with going ahead here and having the conversation tonight. Yeah.
I'd be okay with
Yeah.
that.
My assumption, he's probably also in contact with reviewing this beforehand too.
Yeah.
Well, the mayor will be at the city council meeting.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, hearing that, all in favor then of proceeding? Okay.
Yep.
Take it away.
Terrific.
Uh-oh. Don't want to give it away. Thank you for accommodating this presentation. Really appreciate it. Really looking forward to presenting what we've done so far with this project and getting your feedback. We think that's really valuable, as we understand there's a lot of knowledge on this board that could really benefit the update. So let's get to it. Oh my Lord. Wait, down? Kidding me? There is, no. Okay, I think it's working. Sorry about this. Technical difficulties. Okay, so this is an update to a 12-year-old plan adopted in 2012. It's part of the 2024 Planning Commission work plan. It is a project that's looking to institute priority updates to the 2012 document. I'm highlighting and underlining priority updates. That will be discussed later. But we want to bring the document up to date. We want to make it current with conditions on the ground and adopted city policies since 2012. With the work, we want to evaluate the implementation plan. That's at the end of the document. We want to give that a thorough vetting, identify and propose new projects if possible, for hopes that they could be maybe considered for future capital improvement plans. So that's part of the impetus for this project, is to bring those projects, or to bring those proposals forward. Okay. But it might be helpful starting from a pretty basic foundation. This plan is at one geography that the city operates at. There's also the citywide comprehensive plan. That covers everything and a lot more topics than just the specific district plan, although a district plan can be pretty thorough. But nonetheless, it is subservient to the comprehensive plan, so it needs to comply with that comprehensive plan. The benefit of a district plan is it gets into more detail. It can actually address certain challenges and opportunities specific to a geography. So it has that benefit. And below that are small area plans and site plans. Those just get into further detail with building form and other sorts of details that district plans and comp plans wouldn't bother.
I have a quick question on that.
Yeah, certainly.
So paying attention to what you just said, this being subservient to the original, so what's the difference between an update and a change or an amendment is the way I would think of it as a lawyer?
Oh, okay. President Hunt. Is it President Hunt? I'm sorry. I'm still
Acting President.
Acting President Hunt and Commissioner Keller. So this is, when I say subservient, I mean to the comprehensive plan. It's still going to, and then I'm going to get into the scope of work. We're talking about updates, not a full rewrite. We don't. I'll be discussing that in other slides, but that's the scope of this project, is just to institute rewrites to bring the plan current. Does that answer your question? I'm sorry if I didn't answer that. Okay. Could you rephrase or restate your question?
Well, how about we do this? As you're going through it, and you get to a point where it's an adjustment.
Okay.
But let us know where it might conflict with the original document and how this relates to it, because if it was subordinate to the original document, then the revision, change, however we want to describe it, adjustment, then wouldn't have any consequence if they're in conflict.
Right. Commissioner, we're going to try to avoid those. There's going to be a vision and goals that we're going to be maintaining that are in the original document. Okay. Again, as this slide says, it's subservient to the comp plan. Those are district plans. Okay. This is an update that will be taking precedence over the original document in specific parts. We plan on structuring the update so that it's in this is our draft approach, is to construct an addendum that will refer to text and pages that are proposing to be revised.
Okay, so the way I think of it, so this is a draft of, for the sake of discussion, of where, of something we might implement in a more formal way as an actual change to the plan.
Commissioner, correct. Yes, this is just a study session to introduce the project and also get your feedback on the research that we've done so far.
Great.
But we plan on between now, and I'll get into this even further or later when we're talking about the schedule, because this is the first round of study sessions. We'll have a second round at the end of this year, and then we'll move into public hearings next year to have to get to that adoption.
So we're studying what we might do to make an, honest to God.
I'm sorry, what's that? Can you-
So we're studying with the goal of making the honest God change.
Yes,
Oh, right. Sorry
Correct.
to drag you off topic if that's what I did.
Commissioner. Yes.
Yeah, before we start, the underlayment of all this is the district vision. And I pulled up the existing one offline. Is the district vision changed from the old one to the new one? I didn't see it in materials, or I hope I didn't miss it, but
Oh, Acting President Hunt and Commissioner Lunds, the vision has not changed. We are operating from that 2012 document where they adopted the vision and goals at that time. Nothing has changed since then, and we have no intention of changing that vision and goals. Because we've constrained ourselves to an update as opposed to a full rewrite. We don't want to go through the necessary work, but still resource-intensive work to construct a new vision and new goals that follow from that vision. So we are maintaining those two based on the resources we have for this update. Yeah, no problem. Okay, continuing on. So I've kind of already addressed some of these points, but I'll just restate them. This update is important because it's a 12-year-old document. There's been a lot of changes in the area, not only with the on-the-ground conditions, but the people living there. The demographics have changed, household numbers, jobs, a lot of shifts that we need to account for, especially shifts in the real estate market. It's no secret that office is struggling with this post-pandemic reality. And so how do we accommodate this change in that market and all the other markets that are filling that void? So we're going to want to take account of that. There's been a lot of new development in the South Loop area. So we want to account for that, and how is that aligned with the original intentions of the plan adopted in 2012? Do those follow through? That's going to be a good discussion, I think, at the end of this presentation. But nonetheless, we want to account for that new development. We know there's been significant public investments. That's really important to account for. We have new staff and resources since 2012. We have sustainability staff. We have creative placemaking staff. Those are important additions to the city's personnel to bring forth that expertise and have that directly accounted for in this update. They didn't have that back then, but nonetheless, they made efforts to have, to talk to creative placemaking and sustainability, but now we have that expertise and staff available to facilitate this update. And since 2012, we've had a bunch of new plans adopted, and we're going to have to account for those. And how do we incorporate the bigger points from those plans into this update? They're not all specific to the South Loop. Some of them are citywide, but nonetheless, how do we tailor them to the South Loop update or South Loop district plan update? And why not a rewrite? We just, as I mentioned before, the resources we have are more suited for an update, and not for a fuller rewrite would be a much bigger process. Plus, we're trying to accommodate the timing of other plans that are coming up. We have the 2050 comp plan that's kicking off next year, an economic development plan in the making. Creative placemaking has their own strategic plan, and there's other plans that we want that are going to be adopted after this plan or this update will be completed. And so we don't want to go too full force with an update while knowing that these other documents are being prepared and adopted after us. So a fuller rewrite would be more prudent after those other documents have been adopted. And staff is still, or I mean, I think the entire market is still wondering how office is going to play out in this post-pandemic world. Is it going to recover? Is it going to take a different form? We just want a fuller accounting of how it's going to shift with new market realities in real estate. The original South Loop District plan, that was meant to be a guide for development and capital improvements up until 2050, so several decades. And it structured itself around four signature elements that were identified in the plan. Those were Landau Lane, 24th Avenue, 34th and American, and the Bluff area. So it addresses each signature element and discusses them through the framework of land use, transportation, parks, economic development. All of those are kind of analyzed through those different lenses. And I know you have a copy of the vision and the goals. They're here before you on this slide. Something that's worth highlighting and might generate additional discussion toward the end is this plan was intended to transform the South Loop from a dispersed suburban area into an urban area. So a lot of the policies are trying to facilitate that transformation. And we're going to be evaluating those. That's going to be part of this and seeing how successful some of those strategies or policies have been since 2012. The schedule before you shows that this project kicked off in July, hopes to wrap up in April of next year. And I include a little bit at the right end of that schedule showing that, we're hoping to get ideas for projects that can make it into the plan, and then they'll be more supported when the city develops its capital improvement program. Some of those plans could actually make it into that effort. So we want to make sure that those plans are identified, or those projects are identified in this update. The team that composes that for this project, each member of that team did their own review through the lens of their expertise, and members of the Port Authority looked at the plan and they identified some issues that the 2012 plan has to deal with. Office market trajectory is clearly a big issue that we'll have to have sorted, and we'll have to take another look at Landau Lane because it's developed a little bit differently than what was intended as shown in the 2012 plan. So that's something that's going to have to be examined as well. And they noted that a business improvement district was something that was proposed back then, but I don't believe I haven't found any evidence that it was actually studied. That was one of the projects to come out of the 2012 plan, but otherwise, I wasn't able to find any evidence of that study. Yes, Commissioner.
Yeah, if you go back a page to the SLDP vision and goal, that is the vision. I had missed that going through because it's been retitled somewhat. It used to be district vision, but I see there is a new one. I mean, it's been restructured. It's basically the same, but 5, create a sustainable district. That appears to be an addition. So by sustainable, that's coded word for environmentally sensitive, I'm guessing. Is that correct?
Acting President Hunt, Commissioner Lunds, I don't know about coded. I think that was a topic that was talked about pretty extensively not extensively, but it was addressed in the plan. They have an entire section dedicated to sustainability. And not only that, but all the signature elements that I identified before are examined through a lot of principles of sustainability, land use, water resources, utilities. Mm-hmm. So I think it's it's accounting for not only just sustainable development. Well, I guess there was other initiatives proposed that spoke to sustainability, like certain area-wide district energy. So,
Sure.
but I think some of that stuff needs to be re-examined and reconsidered with this update. That's what we plan on doing. But
I didn't mean to slow you down. It's
Yeah.
it's primarily the same. It's been paraphrased and restructured slightly.
Okay.
But number 5, I've got the old one in front of me, the one that's on the website now. That I don't see a mention of that. So anyhow, sorry. Go ahead.
oh, no problem, Commissioner. Okay. So, as part of the review of the document, there is that implementation section at the end of the plan that shows a list of projects that was proposed back in 2012. Team members were tasked with examining that list and looking at individual projects and giving a status update. There were numerous projects that were that are relevant to the Port Authority that were found to be complete, numerous that weren't started, and others that were just removed from consideration. So we did look at that. We will be, again, evaluating those projects, especially those that have not started, to see are they worth pursuing still if they haven't even begun. So, and then introducing other projects probably to take their place. That's something worth examining through this process. Okay. And from all these analyses of not only the document but the implementation plan, staff within the scope of the work has tried to narrow the focus of the updates to a list of priority areas that staff has developed, and we're happy to get feedback on it. That's certainly one of the questions I pose to you all, is if this list is adequate, should something be added or removed? Granted, adding something, you should be aware that does mean more staff resources dedicated to updating that, and we're trying to manage this project adequately within the resources that we have available. So we have 5 different priority areas identified, dealing with parks and open space, transportation, development, land use, streetscapes, plazas, open spaces like that, and sustainability updates. Again, sustainability wasn't an expertise that we had necessarily in the city at the time of the development, or at the time of this adoption of this plan. But now that we do, we want that priority area accounted for in this update. And now we can move on to questions to you all that me and Port Authority staff have drafted that can facilitate a discussion. Getting to the first one, like I mentioned before, we have that list of priority areas. I can go back to that slide, but in your judgment, is there anything you would like to add, or have seen added or removed, or how would you revise this list of priority areas in a way that speaks to the concerns of the Port Authority?
Commissioner Nelson?
Thank you, Acting President. 2 quick items on there for potential consideration are public safety. I know there have been concerns about that in the area with the transportation network in particular. I know that this city has done great work on that to make sure it is, but I think it's an area to take a look at, and if it's something we need to plan, and how do we design, how do we approve things with regards to that. And then, I don't think this really fits in there, but just throw out grocery store. Yes. I can survive. But those would be the things that I saw.
Commissioner Peterson?
Thank you. One area, and you talked about it a little bit in the introduction, is something that you were kind of holding back on because it's unclear where it's headed. But I think the trajectory on office space utilization is something that, if it's not something that can be addressed in the update, it needs to be on the list of things that we need to and I suspect we're doing it on a citywide basis, but in this area in particular, given the amount of office space in this area, something to consider in the area to make sure that if there's things that we should be doing to either make that be more viable or make successor uses kind of more viable, I'd be curious to hear about that.
Acting President Hunt, Commissioner Peterson, if I may. I'm glad that you picked that out from the presentation. That is a topic that we do want to have addressed. So we're not going to be pushing that off to a later date or to a later update, I suppose. I mean, again, we have to be cognizant of the resources we have available and the time that we're hoping to accomplish the adoption of this update. But nonetheless, we think the addressing the office market might be wrapped up in the third bullet point, development goals and guidance by area. We want to make sure that we're addressing the office market within that priority area. And to also update you, planning staff this hasn't started yet, but we do intend to look at rules and regulations about office to non-office conversions. I mean, the alternative to office has primarily been residential, and so we're going to be examining that to see how we can adjust any of the code that we can that we're able to see if we can help ease any sort of burdens or stress with converting office to residential.
That was an additional comment or concern that I had, is just because the office market is what it is right now, that we don't discount that entirely, but still keep that as maybe something how we can pursue other space coming in there and so forth, other business owners and so forth, would be still to keep an open mind on that and just not say, oh, the market's bad, therefore let's switch gears. So
Yeah,
glad to hear that. Commissioner?
Yeah, and to extend that, one of the things I think about when we talk about an area and how we will or will not have goals that are very specific, and clearly, the vibe here is about what's going on with office space. But if we make a move one way or the other, the question I have in my mind is, are there other parts of the city where adjustments can be made to accommodate, for example, to put a fine point on it, we look at offices going down and make an adjustment in the relationship between residential office and South Loop, such that less office, and knowing that office as a citywide thing has always been and always will be a goal. If we slice out a chunk of the office we had planned for, are there other places where we could promote office to accommodate an upswing in that market?
Acting President Hunt and Commissioner Keller, that comment is almost reflective of some of the feedback we got at the Planning Commission meeting on October 10th, last Thursday, where some of the goals that are specific to the South Loop, do they see them being applicable to other areas if they're not emphasized so much in this update? So I think office certainly falls within that sort of examination, is where does office, if it's not thriving in the South Loop, where else could it possibly go? And I think that's something we can examine. We'll probably reserve the bulk of that sort of analysis to the comp plan update. I think that'll be more thoroughly examined by then, but we're certainly going to be addressing office as it's seen or its viability within the South Loop. Within this update, we're going to have that examination.
I see this as how people look at Bloomington. We promote the city as a whole, and we're putting an emphasis on South Loop. So and I have no idea the reality of people's thinking out there, but if we start backing away from office space, does it make people interested in office space decide that the city as a whole not so interested? So the concern again, to fine point it, is that do we have other places we can, that are susceptible to that kind of development so that the city can, as a city, continue that message without it seeming to be de-emphasized because of one area of the city. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes.
Any other comments?
Okay, we can move on to the next question. So with your experience examining the South Loop, being in the South Loop, your history with the South Loop, are there any recent developments that occurred there where you feel like it was inconsistent with the plan as it was written in 2012? And can you offer a reason for why you observe that inconsistency?
Commissioner Nelson, or excuse, Keller. I'm looking at you,
Keller.
Keller.
And I can't believe I'm actually weighing in as much as I am, but the last one kind of struck me when I was prepping for this meeting. And two things about it. One is I don't know what the metric is for successful, and the other is that's a perception of people outside this room. I mean, everybody in this room could just say, I love it, I'm moving there in the next 5 minutes, but I'm not sure that's the audience we're looking for. So who is it that we're trying to succeed with, and how is it we define what success is?
Commissioner Peterson?
Thank you, Madam Acting President. So on your second question there, I always felt that in the SIC development, the warehouse component of the SIC development, and I understand it kind of came as a bundle, and they wanted to have a single location, but if you had built the office and then built the warehouse separately as two separate developments, I would have more of an internal conflict over that particular kind of use in there, because the warehouse component isn't a super intense use and doesn't make as strong of use of the infrastructure we put in there from an occupancy perspective as the office uses are in there. On your third point, I tend to be pretty patient about this sort of thing and be willing to wait for stuff to happen. If you look at kind of what we've been trying to make happen in that area, it took, with the folding of control data in the 1980s and the process that parcel kind of went through, it took a long time for that to kind of get in a position where there was a developer, and a marketplace that kind of got together and kind of created what they've been able to create over there and make that work. And we were patient and allowed that to happen. And so I think sticking with something and saying this is what we'd like in the long run is what I would like to do personally. And I compare it, when and I think it's called Market Point. It's the shopping center that has like Trader Joe's and Total Wine and that shopping center. And that parcel was originally part of the office tower next to it. And the developer and their representative came and said, we want to do this power center as kind of a holding use until the office market kind of comes along and makes a spot. And I can measure when that happened because I was on the planning commission at that point, and that would have been between 1996 and and
That was Circuit City, wasn't it?
yeah, and Circuit City and that sort of thing. And so and I think you could go back and look and say, is there a different use that would have been a better long-term use on that site than that particular kind of use? Maybe not. At that point, you had the pressure of more office being developed. It might have just moved that office building that I think of as being it's just to the west of Trader Joe's that has the CBRE building. It might have just moved that building kind of one parcel down in the rank of buildings, but I think being patient for those sorts of developments to come along and saying this is what we'd like. At the same time, having stuff stand for 40 or 50 years and not, having a use, is that really the right thing to do either? And I think the other thing in that third bullet that's something that needs to be thought about is, we have in different developments that the port have been involved in, we have different developers with different financial ability to kind of execute currently. Some of them are in a pretty good position to be able to finance projects and make them happen. Other ones, I guess we'd say struggle, kind of with their ability to bring equity to projects and kind of make a deal come together. And so part of, I think, what we have to look at is, who are we partnering with on particular projects, and or in developments where there's going to be a series of projects, and do they have the financial capability to perform in the future? So, and on the final bullet, I think we're making progress on making it be a branded place. I think the investment in public art has been a good thing. I think we have the neighborhood by the BCS train station that I think is largely becoming a place like that, and with the completion of the square and so on, I think is working. Linda Lane, I think to your point, is a little bit less. It's a little bit less a place at this point as opposed to a road that's got some hotels along it. But will that change as there's a little bit more development along there? Probably. So there's one person's feedback on that.
I'll piggyback on your comment about the where the Trader Joe's was, and that was to be a temporary. Yeah, you're right. That is your call. Yeah, office and that complex, and again that Lindell Lane hasn't developed like we'd like to see. I mean, we have a whole lot of, as you drive through there, you're thinking, am I in South Loop? Am I in Bloomington? When you go through all those apartments and on 34th, and every time I go, I've got clients over there, and I look and it's like, there's another building that's come up, and I think we've got a lot there. So if we can get more, and I know we're focusing on that and what we can do, and that grocery store that just doesn't ever come back.
Can I just follow up a little bit more on that?
Sure.
I think one of the things that I take away from the relative success of the BCS parcel versus the parcels closer to the mall is I think the BCS parcels, it's a little bit more of a neighborhood. It's kind of a place. You can get to the river bottom. You have hit some development across the street. The Health Partners Tower and the Reflections Towers and the Ceridian headquarters across the street. It has much more of the vibe of like a complete thing. And that area by the mall, there's still like a patchwork of vacant parcels. You have to face the giant 6-story parking garage across the street, which is a kind of a brutalist kind of structure if you like that.
I mean, brutalism architecture.
Well, brutalist, like the tower. There's towers in Minneapolis down by the university that are that way. The Rarick Center and is a great example of one. But that area, I think, from a kind of an arrangement of uses and making a place, we've just been much like successful over there at making a place. And maybe the key thing to that is to take that away and say, okay, we need to redouble our efforts to make that into a place. And figure out what needs to be done in order to make that occur, because that's I think what's made it work on the East End. Is it's a combination of having a developer that's been consistent about it and making a place.
Commissioner Lenz.
Yeah, I'm a couple little questions here. I printed out some of these sheets earlier in the day, and on this one here, which was online earlier today, there were 6 bullet points. We're down to 4 now in this presentation. And there were a couple of things in there I thought were good in the 6. And one of them was, what is your patience for implementing the plan as written, which Steve addressed on. And then I didn't understand this question. What if the market demands something else like SIC? And I believe you addressed that too, having a warehouse component. That really isn't an urban use per se. But that's such a great development. Employment employment and income wise and everything
Yeah,
else.
I took
it's-
that.
it's
that,
easy
that
to
was like
overlook.
that was like the vegetables you had to take to get the other part.
Yeah, right. That's a win-win. But the other bullet point taken out was should the city be willing to move away from walkability? I don't know how you have an urban neighborhood without walkability. I mean, I just think that's contradictory in a statement. You've got to narrower streets, closer buildings, height, density, and height. You've got to make it walkable. So, you know, and this other one got taken out too. What is the preferred zoning code framework for the South Loop form-based or uses? I don't know what that means. So I'd need a little more definition on that. And are there any concerns about mixed use? I don't have any concerns about mixed use, but I mean, there must have been some reason this got whittled down to 4 and readapted, and it must have been fairly late.
Well, I'll take the blame on the second to the last one because I said that the zoning framework is a wonky planner thing, and that the Port Authority commissioners aren't into wonky planner stuff.
Wonky, yeah.
So I don't know if I'm insulting the planners. I enjoyed being a wonky planning commissioner, and I think Commissioner Hunt enjoyed it too. But it's
did.
not what this group is about. So
Commissioner Keller, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I wanted to support Commissioner Lunds about the walkability. And strangely enough, that has some relationship in my mind to the whole grocery store thing. I don't know how many people have spent, an extended stay in a rental apartment or what have you, and you've done it near a highway, and you have to either take your life in your hands or a cab just to get there, and it's not worth it. Then you get to the delivery thing and and that kills the grocery store. So I just don't see how we can avoid that. And this is maybe a ludicrous analogy, but there used to be incredible streetcars in this region, and once you lose that right away, that is gone. And I think you do have to, even if you don't put a sidewalk in right away, you got to make the space. And the other thing that I've said in a couple of different contexts before is if we are going to have a sense of placemaking, can we at least have some residences that aren't square with square balconies that are supported by iron bars? Because otherwise it starts to look like a military headquarters because everything's the same. And I don't know. I thought they were all very cool when I first started seeing them. And now that's the only thing I can see, and it makes you want to move to St. Paul. I mean, it's just the truth of it. There's a lot. The coolness goes away after you get to a certain point, and it's not the school of barbarism. So that yes. It has a certain bulk by cutting. Do we get a good deal on the same building?
It's a nice offshoot to the pause that a lot of lenders have on apartment lending, that we don't have these same properties going up block by block, city by city.
And they've
same.
metastasized everywhere in the Twin Cities.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
the newest stuff on.
Yeah, it's not just Bloomington.
Shane Rudlin, God bless him, always referred to the Hilton at France in 494 as the Moscow Hilton. So
And that's one of the nicer ones.
And anybody who's traveled in East Germany in the 70s will recognize that, yeah.
Commissioner Nelson?
Thank you. I remember that Circuit City. I was in high school, so just throwing that out.
Sean, you're not old enough. I remember when it was the France Avenue Drive-In, and before that, I think it was a massive dump, landfill.
I'm impressed you remember.
Okay, moving on.
But I do have a couple comments
okay.
on this. That wasn't my only comment. In terms of inconsistencies, I think one of the challenges that I see in the area is there are at least 3 different things going on. You have the entertainment with particularly driven by the Mall of America. There's some other concepts that have come forward that maybe haven't really moved forward. You have a actually really great, strong, high-tech manufacturing capacity with the semiconductors, with SICK, great jobs. And then you have the BCS and some of the stuff going on around it with more mixed-use residential type stuff. and they seem a little bit segregated, and how do you pull those together in a way that makes sense? Because you have great jobs, residential, very near each other, and so I think there's a good opportunity there. But sometimes when I drive through, particularly in some of the manufacturing stuff, I'm like, I wish it was more vertical. I wish we were using more of this land for more stuff. But these are great manufacturing jobs, great things, and I think the community has a great opportunity with some of this high-tech manufacturing, med tech, things of that nature. I think the clear challenge is, how do you integrate it? How do you make it walkable so you can walk or bike over to your job there and live there? How do you have enough residential to support some retail? Obviously, you got the Mall of America with retail, but some other types of retail, particularly that grocery, or glad to hear we have a new coffee shop in the area now. Those types of things are absolutely critical for that neighborhood feeling, that you can go somewhere and grab a cup of coffee or a glass of wine or something with your friends and family. And so that's the biggest challenge I see in that area, is defining a vision that includes all of those and integrates them somehow. And when you look at an area like downtown Minneapolis, I mean, that is residential, office, and then the manufacturing, industrial is kind of outside of that area, and we're trying to squeeze it all into one place, along with the most visited attraction or mall in the country. So,
And you'd like to have the people, the residents there, or even the people like the Polar Fab, and not just SICK. We tend to focus on that, but Polar Fab's been there for years. And rather than just getting out and heading out, how can we keep them here? How can we keep the residents of the tenants perhaps working in the area, but certainly shopping? And it's kind of a repeat. We all repeat that one: grocery.
if I might just add one comment, I mean, I remember when my wife worked downtown, you'd work and then you'd go out with your colleagues and meet friends and stuff, and there were things to do there, and that for that livability part, there isn't a lot of that unless you go into the mall. Hazelwood's fantastic, I think it is, but having some more options like that, I think, would really help out that area. What? Yeah, well, actually, I think they do that at BCS.
And to Commissioner Peterson's point, when you're looking at the lovely eastern structure of the parking ramp, and you've got a lovely restaurant right across the street, Hazelwood, a nice hotel, AC, and they come out of there and they look at the monstrosity, and it's part of the mall. I mean, hey, I was there when we built it, so it's just what we have to deal with. So. Any other questions? Okay.
Acting President Hunt, Commissioners, Commissioner Peterson kind of addressed all the questions by himself, and so if there are any other thoughts to the questions before you, or if you just have any feedback to the presentation itself, happy to take it.
Commissioner Nelson?
Thank you. Just one on the last question about the branding, because this is an issue that came before the council at one point. They were going to put the big bird by 494, and we moved it into the back of house. So in my opinion, I think it's good that South Loop has its own identity, but I think it's important that it's Bloomington. Mm-hmm. And that was the concern that we had. You come in and it was South Loop and that sort of thing. So that's just one person's opinion. Is I want to make sure it's still, even though it's a distinct part of it, it is still Bloomington.
It's Bloomington. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Have a good night. And you'll be hearing from us as we advance this update. We'll be providing you all those updates as well. We have a Let's Talk Bloomington page where we're going to be updating that page regularly as we move through the project, and it'll serve as a repository for other documents too. So again, staff is always available to take any questions or comments that you have. So again, thank you very much. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Acting President.
Yeah, thank you again for the attention. And if I could just add one last thing, is just to thank your staff who are working with us directly and who are a conduit into this project. So you have our contact information, but also you can reach out through Holly, through Barb, through Kevin, through all the port members who are engaged in helping us in this process. And so we'll continue to collaborate with them and report back to you. So thank you.
Thank you.
Can I ask one other question?
Sure.
That I forgot to ask earlier? Since Mr. Johnson came up, he can take this one. So, is there any benefit or any reason why we might consider slightly delaying this because of those other projects that are ongoing? There was a slide earlier with 5 other studies that I think are happening over the course of the next several months. Forget about the comprehensive plan. That's going to happen for a long time and always be part of the cycle. But would this benefit from those being done before this, or have you coordinated the timing of this to, I just don't want something to come out of those that would have maybe changed something in this plan.
Yeah, Acting Chair Hunt and Commissioner Nelson, the one thing I would say to that, I guess, is planners like to plan, and so there's always going to be another plan. Much to the chagrin about actually implementing these things is always the second challenge, right? But next year we're going to start the process of looking at the 2050 comprehensive plan. In addition to that, we're contemplating different ideas about doing some small area plans that connect to the South Loop, potentially an American Boulevard corridor plan if they continue to build up transit along American Boulevard. That'll be an opportunity. And so I don't think there's a perfect time in terms of how to sequence all these things. Would South Loop benefit from knowing the exact strategies and tactics of the economic development plan? Certainly. But I think that one can continue to feed into the other, and things can be adjusted on the fly as you kind of reprioritize things. And we certainly can look back when we do the 2050 comprehensive plan as well. Right now, just from a perspective of big picture, what we're trying to accomplish here is we have a few key opportunity sites left in South Loop, and we want to make sure that we're having an updated 2024 conversation as opposed to a 2012 conversation as to what staff should be focused on as we look at those sites, and do we have the right land use guidance or zoning, if you want to get into the wonky stuff, and what other things should we be integrating into those sites with respects to public spaces and parks and those things. So that's the conversation we need to have, and it's probably best not to wait too long to have that conversation.
Thank you very much for those comments. And I also partially see it the other way too, that I think it'll be positive to have this at least in the works and have some feedback from all the groups as the plan moves along when we get to the airport parking in particular, because I think a big part of the airport parking conversation is about the vision for this area and what we want to do in that area, and if airport parking is part of that plan, and how it's part of that plan, I guess. I don't want to freak anyone out. But.
No, I agree with that. Last, before I leave, also want to extend an invitation to President Erickson if he wants to follow up with us individually. We certainly can make ourselves available to make sure that his voice isn't lost in this process.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you all.
Okay, next item on our agenda is item 2.2, Annual Housing Report 2023 presentation, all things housing. And we have Michelle Lincoln from our Planning Division presenting to us. Welcome.
Thank you. Acting President and Commissioners, it's a pleasure to be seeing you all. Some of you have met me. It's great to see you again. I presented in a joint HRA report meeting this presentation for the 2022 housing report last year, and now I am here to present the next iteration of all things housing.
No budget. No budget for it.
There we
There
go.
we go.
I have a pretty short presentation for you, but tonight I will be going over demographics, existing housing, affordability, and accomplishments in housing for 2023. And we will move through those at a good pace. And then at the end, I will, of course, pause for questions and we can discuss more. Whoops. Let me go back here. So as you can see, Bloomington continues to grow. In 2022, this is based off of census data, which is also what the Met Council uses for their projections. We have increased to over 90,000, and that will continue to happen over 2023 and 2040 through projections. And our number of households will also increase. So we'll have more people and more households in the coming decades, and 2022 data shows that that is the case. Our average household size has increased just a little bit, but it's so small that we're kind of just holding steady. Our households with children decreased slightly. That's from the last year's report. So if you're looking at that, that typically is something that you look at in trend. So from last year to this year, it could be a decrease that you might see in coming years, but based on the previous 5 or 10 years of data, this is about where households with children have been. Also, it doesn't necessarily indicate the number of children in the city. Households can have multiple children, but they're still only counted once. So a slight decrease, if you notice from last year, isn't really something to note fully right now until we have some more census data in the coming couple of years. Our residents that are older than 65 have increased 3% from last year, about 3% from last year. This is also in line with Bloomington continuing to age as a whole, as the population, the average age. The median age is 41.8, which is a little bit down, which can be really kind of a representation of the data, but it's still kind of staying steady. It is the fourth oldest in peer cities, and those peer cities are listed on page 5 of the annual housing report, which was in your attachments, but it's also available online under HRA reports. Sorry, I got a little rambunctious. Our demographics from last year to this year have remained fairly steady. The distribution across race and ethnicity have stayed about the same. And so we are continuing to be more diverse every year. And so looking over the next couple of years, we'll probably continue to see that trend. Our existing housing types are also staying, the distribution of those housing types are also staying about the same. 50% of our housing units are single unit detached homes. As you can see, we're the multifamily is at 1/3, and then we have other homeowner opportunities, which also could be rentals, but homeownership, condos, townhouses, co-ops. Miscellaneous residential is a category that might include properties that have had different types of improvements and don't quite fit into the other categories. So it's a little bit on the miscellaneous side, but this is all of our housing. We have a good spread of different housing types, and in the future you can consider continuing to increase housing as well as increasing the types of housing, which could give more residents and future residents opportunities to live in the housing type that is right for them at the life cycle that they're in. This is showing our single family rental licenses. There was 190 new licenses Last year, you can see that there was 184. It stays about the same because some people don't renew and some people have new licenses, so it stays fairly steady. As you can see, for the last few years, it's been increases of 30. You've had some dips, but it stays fairly level.
Madam Chair. So one thing that I've read about a little bit is, at least at the national level, there's a trend toward like corporate buyers of housing for single family homes for rental uses. And it seems like that hasn't happened, at least in Bloomington. Do you think that's like a regional thing where they just haven't come to the Twin Cities and bought up homes like that? Or what do you think, what when I read about that and then I look at this, I'm like, why am I not seeing that trend here? So.
Acting President and Commissioner Peterson. So with Bloomington, Lynn Moore, our environmental health supervisor, spoke a little bit about this, and there are a few, I guess you could say, corporate landlords that do own some housing, single-family housing in Bloomington, but those are people that have kind of been here for like established, like they've been here for a very long time. The kind of coming in of maybe, do you mean like other national, or investment?
Yeah,
like
I read about firms that do that, and I know
I just
some
wanna
of
make
that
sure.
market is where they're off buying like part of a subdivision or having something built as single family for the purpose of renting it out. But I also know that there have been businesses that just accumulate property that.
Yes, I just wanted to clarify to make sure I knew which corporate landlords you were talking about. I think that in Bloomington, some of the factors that go into that might be holding that off is we don't have like a ton of vacant land that we're building large subdivisions in. So a lot of times, like equity capitalists or venture capitalists that might be doing that don't really have the opportunity here. It just hasn't been as present. I'm not unclear on why. It could be a lot of things to do with our zoning ordinance or our policies that have made it so that way large swaths of single-family homes are being purchased. Also, actually, this might help here. Let me go to the next slide here. That might also help contribute. There's many characteristics. I'm actually going to skip ahead just a little bit. I'm hoping that I have this in here. Our median home value in Bloomington is $361,800. So that means 50% of houses are more expensive and 50% houses are less expensive than that number. Sometimes in those cases, purchasing at that price in order to rent out doesn't make sense. And also in the last, 3 years, with the cost of debt, makes that even less appealing. So it does affect our affordability for, residents who want to live here for rents and home ownership. But it may have also deterred people from purchasing in this market for that purpose. So it's a little bit of a double-edged sword. So there's the... And this might be a good place to operate where we try to build more housing, have more affordability in order to get it to people who need housing, like individuals who need housing, without having as much impact from the trend that you're talking about nationally in some places. Yes.
Yeah, Michelle?
Ones. Yes.
Yeah. Would you go back to rental licensing?
Yes.
The two lines here? Can you give
that.
me a little clarification on that? I don't know what we're showing here. We got a gold line and a blue line. I don't see a key on it. And so I don't...
Yes, the blue line is the total rental licensing, and the gold line is new licenses.
Oh, those are new licenses.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I missed that. I
No
apologize.
worries.
Yeah, thank you. Just one thing to follow up on Commissioner Peterson's comments. I don't know why historically there haven't been a lot, but I think one of the things that those corporate larger investors look for is buying groups of houses at one time, and our rental licenses tend to be, from what I recall that we got information on last time this was asked about, is individual, or maybe like you own just a few houses. And so we just, for whatever historical reason, we don't have someone who had 50 houses and had someone from, a hedge fund come in to want to buy them. And it's much more difficult to buy one at a time than to go buy, 10 or 15 at a time portfolio of them. And so I think a lot of this just has to do historically with, strong home ownership, and, the rental market was maybe largely people in this community that moved into a different house and rented out their previous house or something like that. So I think it's a great question, though. I think it's really important to keep an eye on.
Yeah, and just to follow up, I don't think it's necessarily like a good thing or a bad thing necessarily. Some people accuse them of jacking prices up. It's more of a curiosity question. Yeah.
Acting President and Commissioners, additionally, Twin Cities as a whole, it's showing that investor-owned single-family rentals are actually only 3.4% of rentals in the Twin Cities as a whole. So it seems like there is kind of a regional trend as well. And so Bloomington being in the region is also kind of falling into that. This is housing tenure. I show the United States, Minnesota, and Bloomington, and then break it down by race and ethnicity. Bloomington has a larger homeownership percentage of housing of people households that are owner occupied or renter occupied. It's greater than the U.S., but not Minnesota as a whole. Minnesota has a strong homeowner residential population. As you can see, there's great disparities between white Hispanic and white non-Hispanic and other races in homeownership. The largest gap being between white Hispanic and white non-Hispanic and Black or African American homeownership. A majority of people in housing or households in Bloomington that are Black or African American are renter. There's a lot of factors that go into that, but it is something of note in order to be mindful of as we are trying to increase home ownership. People who want home ownership, we want them to own homes. Not everyone does, but many, many people do. So it's just kind of being mindful as we try to increase those numbers and getting the people that want homes into homes that they own.
Madam President, I got a question here.
Commissioner Peterson?
So considering the second and the third lines on here, the second one being the Minnesota statewide and the third one being the Bloomington one, and you see there's about a 4% difference in ownership percentage for Minnesota versus Bloomington. How much of that do you think is attributable to differences in the demographic composition of the city versus the state? In other words, how much of that difference is reflecting just demographics of the city versus some other factor?
I think that there's a lot of considerations going into the difference between Bloomington as a locality and municipality versus the state. One of them also might be there are just less renters outside of the Twin Cities metro area, per capita, in some place that might be more rural, you might be seeing where people have just bought land or their homes, or they might have generational kind of ownership as well, where parents may have passed to children and then their children to their children as well. Also, cost of land is also less outside of the Twin Cities metro area, which could mean that people, the affordability might draw more homeowners or landowners to those other areas. So there's, when you kind of look at the the state as a whole, and you start kind of putting every single, person in the pot and determining renter owner or renter occupied housing, you kind of get this difference, this about 3% difference, which is in the sheer number, when you think about people, is quite large, but in percentages are fairly close. But those factors I mentioned could also impact why there might just be less renters outside of the metro area based on like cost of land and housing. So income and employment, Bloomington continues to increase in the median income year over year, along with the Hennepin County and the region. The Hennepin County, Bloomington, and the region are all kind of increasing at a similar rate, except you see here in the region that in 2022 the income stayed fairly the same, while incomes for Bloomington and Hennepin County increased. There's still a lot of impacts that are kind of coming from COVID and the change in a lot of employment industries and salaries, which could contribute to that. So that's why we might have seen this, 2021 and 2022 kind of stay the same. Things are still adjusting from that time. Additionally, I have the regional area median income here. These are the numbers from HUD. This is what they consider 100% of the area median income is $124,900. This is $6,700 more dollars than last year. These numbers are very important because it determines, these are the thresholds for affordability. These numbers here in their formula extrapolate to what's an affordable home price and what's an affordable renting price. So seeing that increase also means that it's responding kind of prices, the economy, but it's also showing that as these increase $6,700 more dollars, median or like incomes for individuals may not have increased in the same amount. So more and more people are being captured in some of these 80% or below AMI, which means that housing affordability as well as other necessities are very important and at the very forefront of many households' minds. Medical care, daycare, and how their income is responding to that, and will become like a greater concern to anyone in Bloomington as time goes on.
Commissioner Lenz?
I'm just noting the disparity between Hennepin County and Bloomington. And if you go back to 2010, it was really close. Widened a little bit, 2020, 24, widened quite a bit, and it narrowed a little bit in 2022. Do we know why? I mean, what's happening? Why are we falling behind the county? I know. Or have been.
You're talking about county numbers, yes.
Disparity is increasing is what I'm saying.
I'm not sure. Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Nelson?
Thank you. Can you help me understand the difference between the region median income at $87,000 and the regional area median income at $124,000? I mean, that's $37,000 difference between the two. Can you just help me understand how those numbers relate or don't relate?
I would do the best I can to explain HUD formulas. So this is what HUD calculates in order to determine thresholds for like assistance and benefits, and a lot of agencies and governing bodies follow suit. So 100% AMI is $124,900, and we're probably between 60 and 80% AMI for our median income. For that, it kind of means that a lot of people who are in that bracket are available for, like, can get assistance as costs go up. This does put more strain on programs, so, being mindful and making sure that those, we're taking advantage of money that comes down from higher levels of government, or the monies that we produce at the municipality level are there in order to respond to the market and incomes changing in this way. It also means that the people who might need benefits are eligible for them. And I think HUD, there's a lot of things that go into it. Their formula isn't public, like super public. But it's kind of showing like, if you make this amount of money in this region, then you're good. There's probably housing available that is affordable to you. You can afford the cost of necessities. And that's kind of what they're saying here. It's not necessarily indicating luxury or like extreme wealth, but it is showing that the things you need for quality of life, you have access to and can pay for. And so they're saying if you don't have that, here are the other percentages of area medium income, and then programs are developed from there in order and who they service.
I appreciate that. As a policymaker, my concern about it is that if the median income really is in the region 87,000, not 124,000, as a community, we are investing significant money through TIF and other programs. We got a housing trust fund and all that, and a lot of that is going towards people at 60% AMI, to what we would call affordable, but that just seems to be the median. And I just, that's how far out askew housing is for most people. Mm-hmm. That, we have to look at ways to subsidize the construction of housing that, frankly, someone at the median can afford. I think it highlights the huge issue that housing and the affordability of it is within the country and the region.
Mm-hmm.
Commissioner Keller?
I'm sure because I'm completely lacking in the ability to deal with numbers that it's obvious to all other humans here. But I noticed that there are 20% increments reflected here, except 50 to 60 being a 10% increase, step up rather, bracket, what have you. What's the deal with that? Why this seems like an odd sort of shrinking in one bracket that's inconsistent with how the other ones are defined. Is there a purpose behind that?
Acting President and Commissioner Keller, I am unsure of the HUD's reasoning for that distribution.
That's consistent with my apprehension of the federal government, so I too accept that response.
Thank you.
So here's the unemployment rate over time, showing Bloomington and the county and the region. Bloomington is the blue line. As you can see, the region had an increase in unemployment from 2022 to 2023. These numbers come from the Minnesota Employment and Economic Development state agency, which is why we have 2023 numbers and we don't stop at 2022, just to clarify kind of where the data is coming from. So as you can see in 2023, the region had an uptick in unemployment, and Bloomington continues to drop. There was a very dramatic drop from 2020 to 2021, and now we're kind of seeing marginal drops from there.
Likely attributed to COVID.
Yes, Acting President. Their COVID was definitely responsible for that spike in 2020, which kind of produced just broad industry impacts. And seeing that's why also as the every geography kind of adjusted and new things were, new solutions and strategies were implemented, we saw kind of this drop in unemployment. Also, some people may have exited the employment market, but I would also like to attribute to adaptive strategies also helping people retain or get new jobs.
Commissioner Nelson? I did it again. Commissioner Keller?
Well, we are the same in all important respects.
Okay.
And this comes less in a form of a question, I think, and maybe more of an observation. But when we were talking about medians, I mean, this 2.5 is a crazy low number. And one wonders what, from the 7.6 to the 2.5, what income levels are reflected in this nearly full employment. So, in other words, has the median gone down or up, depending on, and obviously it does, depending on the income of the added jobs. So if we get a whole bunch of low-paying jobs, this is going to drag the median down because there's that many more low jobs, right? And that many, no matter how many high-paying jobs there are, if the bottom expands, the median's got to come down. Or I'll ask all my people who aren't numerically competent to correct me. Yeah, well, that says something, and I'm trying to figure out what it is.
I think it's good.
Okay, I buy that, but but there's something underlying all of that. I think is it isn't reflected within the realm of my intelligence or competence.
I think inflation and a tight labor market pushed the wage that people are making or the salary that people are making up the last couple of years.
Okay, so the new jobs, if you will, are not coming in at the bottom at the rate perhaps they have in the past or what have you, because the inflation and the economic pressure on employment these are not, migrant labor jobs, obviously, but
even the low income ones, I mean, drive past McDonald's and they're paying over $20, and even though the lower income jobs are paying more now than they did pre-pandemic.
And that's the answer I was hoping to hear.
Yeah. And I don't know that that's the answer. That's just my opinion.
Well,
So,
if it comes from you, it's got to be right.
yeah, I don't think that's
All
true.
right, thanks. I
Yeah.
don't mean to drag us too far in the weeds, but
Acting President and Commissioner, also the median is showing where the middle is. An average would show kind of like if there was an influx, or there's also there could be high-paying jobs leaving the market as well as low-paying jobs coming in. There's kind of a lot of different factors here, but any of those in the direction could skew an average pull an average in any direction. But the median is showing the middle, where 50% of salaries are higher and 50% are lower.
Right.
So there would have to be, in your question, a significant number of jobs at a salary below the median in order to shift the median in a significant way.
And all of this presumably changes housing values because the dollar's chasing the housing, which influences tax base. So it has a positive cascading. I guess it's the opposite of a cascade. It's an uphill skate. Just wanted to understand it because it's how it relates to our economic health in general, and the trend is good in many ways, I guess, for those of you who understand it. Thanks.
It looks good.
Thank you.
Additionally, the state is also increasing its minimum wage number for companies that are larger than 100 employees, starting January 1. So we're kind of seeing an adjustment at all levels, which kind of shows the increases there. This is housing cost burden broken down by income. Housing cost burden is where you spend 30% or more of your income on your housing. From last year, the number that has changed is in owner-occupied housing, which is yellow. That's less than 20,000. That number decreased by 3%, so it was 93% last year. A lot of things could have contributed to that. If you're kind of looking at last year's report and this year's report, a lot of things could be contributing to that. Either those households sold their home and they've moved into housing that is more affordable for them. They could have also paid off their mortgage. So housing is no longer a part of their expenses, except for things like property taxes and insurance. So with home ownership, there's a lot of factors that can go into why that number decreases, and would take a little bit more digging in order to figure out kind of where the main considerations were for this drop from year over year. Additionally, with census data, it's kind of the best available data we have, but it's also a survey, and they extrapolate numbers and estimate numbers. So it'd be very interesting to see in coming years what this trend is. Could be something to look into in the future for noticing sharp decreases over time. For other income bands, they've all increased. Just checking here. They've all increased in housing cost burden. So from $20,000 or more, and including for $20,000 and more, housing cost burden has increased as housing costs rise. Owner-occupied housing, as you in combined, between owner-occupied and renter-occupied, owner-occupied has decreased, which makes sense when we look at the less than 20,000 band and showing that decrease in housing cost burden. And for renter-occupied housing, it is increased by 3% from last year. So it just continues to kind of show the impact that unaffordable housing has on the population as a whole. Because even those who make $75,000 or more are seeing increased housing cost burden. Last year it was 3.9% and 3.7%. So next year it'll be, when the data comes out, it'll be important to kind of see if that trend is continuing, where more people are becoming housing cost burden.
Commissioner Lenz.
Yeah, Michelle, the first bars on the left got me a little puzzled. If your income's less than 20,000, my question just is, how can you afford to own a house to start with if your income's less than 20,000? I mean, I understand the 90 and 81.
You're a senior.
Seniors.
Seniors. Think about seniors.
Exclusively?
No, just, yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I rely on Mr. Peterson a lot.
Acting President and Commissioner Lenz, yes, I agree with Commissioner Peterson. It's often because they might have retirement income, which is less than $20,000 a year, or they may have other things that are supporting them, where the housing might be the biggest expense they have, but as mortgages get paid off, then it's great.
And this is by income, not accumulated wealth, or?
Yes, this is by income. Now, this includes things like dividends or interest payments. What is considered just pure job income is called is called wages and compensation under the census. So this is it's expanded to include other sources of income. Our median for wages and compensation in Bloomington is something like $64,000 if you're only considering what people earn from their jobs. So it's much lower when you do wages and compensation, but typically you see the expanded, like where from all income sources. We looked at this slide a little bit earlier. Here's the HUD area median income coming into play again. Those family income levels are what was shown earlier, but only in the 80% and below. Excuse me. And this is an affordable home price for each of those AMI bands. So as you can see, for 80% AMI, which is the next band down in the HUD levels, an affordable home price would be $304,700. And in 2023, our median home value was $361,800. So that means that likely more than 50% of the housing would be considered unaffordable based on these HUD numbers in Bloomington. So definitely indicates a very tight market for the houses that people can afford, high competition, and also a lot of houses that, for those who are in search of housing, they can't find affordable housing.
Commissioner Peterson.
I always think this slide is an interesting one because if you look at that 80% number, for example, and you say that there's that I think thinking about kind of supply demand balance in this area requires knowing like how many houses were available in that $304,000 range and how many people were in that 88% AMI bucket, because that's really where the market is meeting in terms of supply and demand. Mm-hmm. And I think it's clear, like, at the 50% AMI, you're probably talking a townhouse in Bloomington or a condo is really your choice for housing, and anything that's reasonable in the city. That a single-family home under $200,000 is not much of a single-family home if we had any sales and under $200,000 in there. But that's, when I look at this, that's what I always wonder about is if you stratify the kind of number of families and the number of properties available, that would be the interesting analysis here for me, to really look at the supply-demand balance situation.
And I just want to clarify one other thing. The source of this are assessment reports, Met Counsel. These are not on actual sales. I mean, except that, of course, assessments reflect sales to a certain thing, but you can go on multiple listing service every day and find out what the average sale price of a house. Value is different from sales. So just...
Acting President and Commissioner, the Bloomington housing transactions table on this slide in the, well, I guess for me in the upper right, that is based on the assessment data. So that's coming from city level collected data. And that lists median sales price for those transactions last year. So possibly a condo, maybe a townhome, depending on which 50% above or 50% below you're searching for as far as sales price. Bloomington average rent stayed fairly steady from 2022 to 2023. See an only slight increase in the total average price. There was slight increases in studios to 3 bedrooms, which indicates why it kind of went up a little bit. The largest increase was from 2021 to 2022, which could be also still impacts from COVID, housing availability, or vacancy, or combined vacancy for both owner-occupied or home ownership, homes and rental homes is below 5%. It's very low for home ownership. It's a little over 1% vacancy, and about 4.9% vacancy, or excuse me, 4.2% vacancy for rentals. So that kind of can explain some larger increases from 2021 to 2022 to 2023, but not so much from 2022 to 2023 as things kind of plateaued and balanced out. In our naturally occurring affordable housing, this becomes from a report of all of the rental units that report the rents based on their type of unit by bedroom, the total units. So out of the 10,108 units that were reported numbers for their rental properties, about 60% of them are naturally occurring affordable housing. This is housing that has not received subsidy, but it's considered affordable. So usually there's other factors like the age of the unit, the size of the unit, impact the amount that of rent that's charged. Compared to last year, studio and one bedroom amount of NOAA had increased. 2-bedroom and 3-bedroom naturally occurred affordable housing decreased. So they are less of a share of the total naturally affordable affordable housing units. So I want to talk a little bit about some HRA program accomplishments in housing. So 700 households were assisted in our housing choice voucher programs. We also purchased one home for rental homes for future home buyers, which is where it is a HRA-owned property and people can rent there, and a portion of their rent goes into an account to help them save up for a down payment for a home. There were 5 moves or turnovers from our rental homes for future home buyers programs. And then also in our Journey to Homeownership, which is an educational program, there was 108 people registered over an 11-month time frame, and out of those 108, 9 participants purchased homes. This is a little bit of a breakdown of our residential development and services and the homeownership assistance. So as you can see in our home improvement loans, we had 37 loans approved, and we had a total assistance of over $1 million for those people who were in that home improvement loan programs. 35 loans were repaid in full, and the total repayment amount was a little over $1 million. The average repayment amount was just under $30,000. Additionally, in our housing and environmental loan program, for people who need assistance in making environmental health improvements to their homes, there were 9 loans approved, and the total amount of assistance was $63,000, with about an average of $7,000 per loan. For down payment assistance, we had 14 loans approved in 2023. The total amount of assistance was $147,000, average about a little over $10,000 per loan, and the average home purchase price was $307,314, which, if you noticed, is really close to that AMI affordable housing number. That HUD says what's affordable at 80% AMI. So definitely these programs help people stay in their homes by being able to have capital in order to improve them, make sure they're still quality housing, as well as helping people afford homes in Bloomington. As far as new development, Kenny, who is following me with the OHO update, will talk about new development in his presentation coming up after me. Thank you. I really appreciate you listening to me talk about data. I really love data and I love sharing it, especially about housing. So I appreciate a captive audience. And what questions do you have?
Commissioner Keller.
So we have single-family housing and then multifamily housing and blah, 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 blah. Where does a duplex fit into any of those categories?
Duplex would be, let me see here, I have a breakdown. Excuse me here. So, just looking here. Duplexes fit into miscellaneous residential.
Of course. All right. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Commissioner Lenz, did you have a question?
Just real quick questions, pure curiosity, Michelle. I see HRA bought 5 lots, did it say? 5 lots. I was just kind of wondering, what's a lot go for in Bloomington? I mean, do you know off the top of your head? If you don't, that's fine too. I was just kind of wondering about that.
Acting President Commissioner, I do not know what the average lot goes for in Bloomington.
That's a vacant bare land lot, I presume too, because you differentiated from homes that were purchased to be scraped, and then, okay.
Location. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you so much, Acting President and Commissioners. It was a pleasure. If you have any more questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm happy to provide more information or even do a little bit more analysis. Well, I could do a lot more analysis actually for you. I love it. So that just putting that out there. And you can also reach out to the HRA with additional questions about their programs, as well as assessment or environmental health for continued data about some of the numbers that I showed you if you have more in-depth questions. But thank you.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda, item 2.3, is the Opportunity Housing Ordinance Report. And we have Kenny Niemeyer presenting. Where did Kenny go? He's right down there, okay. There you are. I thought I saw you. Yeah, you're gonna do this. Okay. Were they up or again?
Thank you, Acting President Hunt and Commissioners. So tonight we have our Opportunity Housing Ordinance annual update. This is a update that's required by the Opportunity Housing Ordinance, and it's required to be brought to the City Council before October 1st of each year. And also it is brought to interested boards and commissions such as yourselves. We brought it to the HRA, I believe that was last week or maybe the week before. So yeah, we'll cover these three main topics. We'll go through the annual update. We'll talk through some upcoming projects around the Opportunity Housing Ordinance. And then, as Michelle mentioned, I'll quickly go through development updates that have taken place over the last year. So just to ground, and actually we've already talked about a lot of this, but the rent and income limits, which we use to establish what we consider affordable rents in our developments that come into the city here, those get set by HUD at the federal level, and they change each year, except for this year. So this year they didn't change. So from 23 to 24 for the levels that we consider affordable for our Bloomington programs, that starts at 60% AMI and below. The income amount didn't change, and therefore what's considered an affordable rent did not change. But it's worth pointing out that it's quite expensive still. So we call out, for example, a 2-bedroom is almost $1,700 a month, and that's considered affordable for our programs, for purposes of our programs. So this chart shows what developers have taken in terms of our development standard flexibilities that they become eligible for through our Opportunity Housing Ordinance. So as you're aware, we've got the two categories of incentives that the OHO offers. One are the development standard flexibilities, the other are financial subsidies. Those are actually both in this chart. So you can see all developments that have come through the city since the OHO was adopted in 2019 have taken advantage of the parking stall reduction. We've also had a majority of projects receive tax increment financing, or request and receive tax increment financing. And then I'll point out that in 2023, we had the first utilization of the project-based housing voucher. So that's the farthest right. And that was in support of the 700 American Boulevard development that is hopefully breaking ground in the coming weeks. And so we were able to partner with them to get 8 project-based vouchers in that development, which provides affordability at that deepest 30% AMI level.
Madam Chair, can you remind me on the previous slide what the difference is between the density bonus and the floor area ratio bonus? Because I can tell you what the floor area ratio is, but I can't tell you what the density one is.
Acting President Hunt and Commissioners, this comes up often, and the reason that it comes up is they're basically a duplicate efforts. And so the reason that we don't see that FAR bonus get utilized is that the density bonus achieves the same purpose. We still hold them in the ordinance as an option, but yeah, that is a question that comes up for sure. So moving on, I wanted to provide a brief report on the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, which was established concurrently with the Opportunity Housing Ordinance back in 2019. And it was originally funded with a loan of around $15 million from Old National Bank. So since 2019, we were able to deploy all of those funds in the form of an Affordable Housing Trust Fund loan to those 5 developments that you see on the right. The per unit subsidy amount has varied over the years. And we can see on the left, that second bullet of creating deep affordability. We were able to support 23 units of housing affordable at that deepest 30% AMI level as a direct result of this subsidy going forward. We also saw the preservation of 306 units of what we consider naturally occurring affordable housing. So we were able to keep those affordable in Bloomington. But the thing that's important to note is that $15 million has been expended. So what we need to work on doing is identifying a new funding source. There are some dollars that are coming in that may be appropriate for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, mainly the local affordable housing aid, which is the metro sales tax, the 0.25% that gets distributed to cities and municipalities. We've received our first half payment for 2023. The next payment comes later this year in December, and then next year we'll start receiving the full amount each year. So this year we received a reduced amount, but it's there, that may be a suitable source to support this trust fund. So I wanted to briefly go over compliance takeaways because last year, or 2023, was our first year for the an in-depth compliance process with our property managers that have units that were required through the Opportunity Housing Ordinance. So I will note that low-income housing tax credit projects work directly with the state for their compliance, so we didn't do a duplication of efforts there. We simply requested compliance reports from the state. But I wanted to highlight takeaways from the other projects, so mainly our mixed income projects. And it was basically a mixed bag. So we had a lot of success with the newly opened projects. After providing technical assistance to get them running, to get them through lease up, we found that they've been very successful with compliance. We then also found that some of the older developments that have been operating for a couple of years now were not in full compliance. So there have been efforts to technical assistance provided to ensure that they're in compliance, and then we did in one case require some back pay was paid to tenants of a property that wasn't in compliance. So that was the first year results here, and then considerations going forward include potentially partnering with an external organization to conduct compliance. That's something that we're exploring, and so we may have more information on that coming up. And then I wanted to go over some upcoming projects. And so the main one will be the Housing Nexus study. This is the Housing Nexus study is what was commissioned to inform the initial Opportunity Housing Ordinance. It was the basis for the requirement of 9% of units being affordable at 60% AMI, and also for the fee in lieu rate of $9.60 per square foot. And that was commissioned in 2018, 2019, and it's reached the end of its relevant lifespan. So it's been 5 years. So we were successful in getting $45,000 from Counsel to fund a renewed study, and the plan is to open the RFP for that study this month, which would inform potential updates to those affordability benchmarks, which would come in front of in front of you, the Port Authority, as well as HRA, Planning Commission, and City Council for final approval and implementation. The other, some other efforts that are underway, I've just listed out here. You can take a look, and happy to talk through any of these if you'd like. And then finally, I'd like to report out on our Met Council goals. So this is the housing need allocation. The Met Council determines based off of projected growth for the metro region. It allocates the need for affordable housing by municipality. So you can see on that bottom column, or sorry, the bottom row is the housing need that has been allocated to Bloomington. And we've been very, very successful in achieving that new development for the 60% area median income and 50% area median income band. So if all of the projects that are currently under construction are completed, we'll have achieved the goal for 50% AMI. And that's for the 700 American Boulevard project specifically. Once that's done, we'll have reached that benchmark. But of course, we have a long way to go on 30% AMI units. So a lot of success with the higher, the units that are affordable to households earning a little bit more. And this highlights again that Affordable Housing Trust Fund that I mentioned. You can see all of the units in the 30% AMI band were supported with trust fund loans. So at least so far, that's the way we've been able to get those units to be built in Bloomington, is by subsidizing through our trust fund. So we'll have to, we'll need to work to find a new source for that if we want to continue getting those units built. So finally, I'll quickly go through some updates to development projects that have happened over the last year. So we've had 4 developments completed since I was last in front of you. That's Carbon 31, Riser, Noble Apartments, and Oxborough Heights. We have currently 3 developments under construction. There's the Enclave development at 6701 West 78th Street. They recently finished their environmental cleanup, so they had some asbestos-laden soil, and they partnered with the city to get cleanup funds to clean that up, and so that's been finished, and they've now started the actual structure. And then 1801 American Boulevard is well underway, and then the Ardor is reaching completion there. And the Ardor, to refresh you, is a fully market rate development that elected to pay the fee in lieu of affordable units. So we're currently holding that fee in lieu within the city, and if they so choose to develop a subsequent housing development that includes affordable units, they can tap into that funding. If they don't do that, by August of next year, that funding gets released, and we could then use it to support housing activities as we see fit, affordable housing activities. And then finally, 700 American, which I already mentioned, they have reached closing for this deal, and groundbreaking is expected in the coming months. And so that is the annual housing report for 2023.
Can I see that 10th slide for just a second?
What, can you remind me? Oh, 10, okay.
Page 10. Look,
is that this?
no, well, that actually helps me. But going forward, the beginning of the part where we're moving into this last phase of this discussion.
Here?
Back. One more.
That's page 10.
Yeah, but it's not the 10th. All right, fine. Can you go back one more and then I'll quit? I'll quit. Here's the reason I asked that. So to support my earlier point, with the exception that I believe I got this right of slide 7, where there's a group of 3 pictures in the middle of which is not, I think every picture of a building in this presentation is of that architectural model that I raised before. So just throwing out there, this seems awfully consistent with the idea that if we're going to talk about diversity, architectural is a problem. Just, not driven to that. But I do have an actual question that's actually more helpful. So everything we do that's affordability related is based on these brackets. Is that correct? So the HUD brackets.
Acting President and Commissioners, in terms of reporting and in terms of how we set the requirements for those properties, yes, we use those brackets, the banding. Yep.
Is that how it's done with respect to individual renters receiving the benefits of what we do?
Acting President and Commissioners, so if renters wanted to live in one of these units, they would have to show that their income for their entire household is at or below the income level at that band.
Yeah, so that percent. So, and I, as an administrative matter, that seems really sensible to me. It just, when you look at the going $1 over the current bracket, the financial penalty for the increase in cost is disproportionate. And that's one of the reasons I was curious about the 10% increment between 50 and 60 as opposed to the other ones. Because some granularity in these brackets would be beneficial to the people that we perceive to be worthy of benefit. And I suppose because we are founding our decisions on HUD numbers, if I understand this correctly, there's not a whole heck of a lot we can do about it, I guess. But there's a fundamental fairness issue there. I mean, there's a lot of consequence to potentially small incremental change to the individual. So that's a common question. Cry for help.
Yeah,
whatever.
Acting President Hunt and Commissioners, I think it's a great question, and it is an issue that I've heard across programs that work through this framework. So, for example, our Housing Choice Voucher Program experiences that same difficulty. I do want to mention with our affordability program, once households get into a unit, if their income exceeds that threshold, they are able to remain in that unit for up to 5 years. So they're not like evicted, their rent doesn't increase.
Okay, that helps me a lot.
So it does, yeah, the goal isn't to displace those households. And then
I just push some taxes out the door, and the granularity of tax tables is so much granular. All right, thank you. That helps.
Any other questions? Thank you.
thank you.
Okay, next item on our agenda is item 3.1, contract for Port Authority Bond Counsel Services, and this will be covered by Assistant Port Administrator Wolf.
Thank you, Acting President Hunt. This evening, the board is asked to approve the services agreement extension to approve Kennedy and Graven Chartered. This is the Ports Bond Council using it again in 2025. The current services agreement was first approved in 2022, will expire at the end of 2024. This does allow us to have 2 one-year extensions. This will be the first of one. No change to the fees, $250 per hour for attorneys and $150 per hour for paralegals. And it is expected that all bond counsel services for Bloomington will still be performed by Julie Eddington. We do have Chief Financial Officer Lori Economy Scholler here for any questions. And also Julie Eddington is online virtually.
Thank you. Any questions? Commissioner Peterson?
Madam Acting President, I move we approve the professional service agreement as stated in the staff report.
Second.
We have an approval first and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Okay, the next item on the agenda is 3.2, Hennepin County Business District Initiative Grant Program Resolution, also to be covered by Ms. Wolf.
Thank you, Acting President Hunt. So this evening before you, we're looking at applying for the Business District Initiative Grant Program with Hennepin County. Last year, we also applied for the program for dollars. We received $35,000 to be awarded out to businesses in our community. The Site and Facade Improvement Program is a new program in 2024, has been very successful. And so we are applying for it again in 2024. So just wanted to give you a little background information. The item before you tonight is quite easy. It's allowing us to apply for the grant if we're awarded the monies to receive them and then also do the budget transfer. But I also wanted to take this time to update you on the program for this year. We did allocate $150,000 in the budget for this year. We also did receive the BDI grant last year to be utilized this year for $35,000. We also used some additional funding to award 10 grants this year for almost a total of $223,000. So here's a list of the 10 businesses that were awarded. And taking a look at, again, this is open to all businesses in our community, although we are taking a specific look at the 8 priority commercial nodes. We'll move to a map next. But I just wanted to highlight here for the $223,000 that we're awarding, that's almost $5.5 million of investment in our community. On the map here, this shows in the pink areas. Now, this isn't citywide. This is sort of condensed to show you the area where the awardees have been. The pink areas are the neighborhood commercial priority nodes that have been identified by the City Council. And then the blue dots are where the awards have been given. The first one that we have dispersed a check to just happened last week. Comfort Inn, the front faces 494. The owner here came in and is a small business owner that started his first business in Bloomington over 30 years ago. He owns Comfort Inn, and you can see here doing an update to the exterior of the building. And what it looks like with the completion, with new windows, new siding, bringing it a little more modernized, especially with the windows and the stucco.
Question.
Sure.
They stucco over the bricks? It was brick, right?
Yeah, it has to have a special application that was approved by planning first
I would
for
think
the
so.
siding.
I don't know if I've ever seen it.
Sure.
Commissioner Keller?
Maybe I just read this line. I was looking for periods instead of comments, and I see we only gave it somewhere in the name of $20,000 to the Hierapolis. Is that how we pronounce it?
Europolis.
Europolis. Okay. Is that project really $1.5 million?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. The Hierapolis one.
Europolis.
Okay. That business guy here thing. Wow.
It was a small former boss of donuts. Look,
Yeah, I know. I
That's
just
expanded.
drove
Oh,
by
yeah,
it this
okay.
evening. Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
wow, that's a lot of money.
It's kind of a messy corner, too.
Very,
Get rid of the gas station.
Legal
Yeah.
title problems with it.
Oh, is that right?
Acting President and Commissioners, just an update on that too. Europolis purchased the vacant gas station in 2020. So the cost for that purchase is outside of this. We also received a grant that we subrecipient was Europolis for $58,400 to help with infrastructure and demolition. So current project here is $1.5 million, but I would say overall it's a much more expensive project. And so this, yeah. And so for this program, it allows for a minimum of $5,000 up to $24,999 for one-to-one match with grant funding and private investment. And so tonight, just asking for action for applying for the program, for the grant program with Hennepin County.
So moved.
motion by Commissioner Keller,
Second.
second by Commissioner Peterson. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. The only other updates that I have, Acting President, is I would just like to make note that the next meeting in November is on the 19th. But just as a reminder, in December, we're moving back to the second Tuesday. So it'll be on December 10th in December. And that's all I had. If there was other updates from President Hunt.
That's it. Motion to adjourn? Oh, I can do it. We are adjourned.